journalism major, minored in sports management. I was talking with your professor, telling him that it's so great to now have these really specific sports classes, because I only graduated 11 years ago, and it just wasn't, you didn't have a sports media class, you didn't have a sports journalism class, you had to major in broadcast journalism, and then kind of pick like a minor and take a couple of classes, and ours were all in the kinesiology. It was actually a graduate level sports management type of thing. So it's really kind of, you kind of have to just kind of piecemeal it. So it's really nice to be able to have these classes now that are very specific and kind of introduce you to what it's like to work in the world of sports as far as journalism goes. But I graduated there in 2004. Actually got my first job though in 2003. I worked in Lexington, which is Market 63. Does everybody know what a designated market area is?
That's your next test, and that's going to be a question, what a
DMA?
DMA is. So that's your next test.
So anybody want to guess what a DMA is? You just had to guess. Designated market area. Go for it.
It's over a specific market area coverage.
What do you think the area around here would be?
It would be flyers, Phillies, the Giants.
So this is actually, Trenton would be kind of an interesting DMA. I don't know, what news do you guys get? Did you get both? Okay, so you get both. So DMA is your designated market area. That is the area that sees your television, or the television sees its people. It's really how to describe it. So in Philadelphia, the designated market area extends all the way down to Delaware, parts of a little bit of Maryland, and into South Jersey, obviously up to Central Jersey, and all the way out to, I think we go as far out as like Reading-ish. So it's Market 4. So there's 230, probably 220 total designated market areas. Number one, any guesses? The number one designated market area, the number one city in America that sees the most televisions on their radar.
New York City.
New York City. Anyone guess two?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Three?
Chicago?
Chicago. Wow. All right. Four, I just told you, is Philadelphia. Gets a little weird because sometimes they move up and down, but last I checked, 5 was a newcomer. They had just shot up. Boston fell down to like 8. So 5, my last one I quizzed you, it's in the middle of the country. Any guesses? Middle south of the country.
Is it Texas?
It's in Texas, but that would be a really, really large market area. Do you want to guess which town in Texas?
Houston?
No. Houston's actually come up though. Houston's now 7. It's anybody guesses? Oh no, Austin's really tiny, like not tiny, but like in the 70s. Dallas, Texas is number 5. But they used to be like 8. And if anybody's ever been to Dallas, it's huge, land mass wise, huge. I mean, the airport itself is bigger than I think half of Philadelphia. It's just the biggest thing I've ever seen. But they don't have that many people, but now they've grown and grown. They took over Fort Worth, there's a bunch of areas, Arlington and things like that. So it's the total area that can see whatever television market it is. The designated market area is probably the best way. I'm sure AJ will have a better explanation for it, but that's kind of the layman's terms, I guess, the easy way to describe it.
If I could interrupt you,
Sure.
sorry, you just said your next test, we'll see if you could answer it. The largest city in America without one of the 4 largest. The largest city in America without one of the 4 professional franchises.
The largest city in America without, and I've got another quiz for you. Without one of the 4, it only has like 2.
No, it doesn't have.
It has none.
None of the 4.
Is it Austin?
It's Austin.
Wow. The Austin, they've grown. Austin is such a great town. It's got a really good music scene. It's a very transient town. Everybody who's not really from there, but a lot of people move there. Obviously, the University of Texas is there. They have their own network, University of Texas, which is pretty cool. But does anybody know there's only one state in America that does not have its own designated market area? It's very close by. Any guesses?
Rhode Island.
No, they've got Providence. That's a good guess.
Delaware?
Delaware, poor Delaware. They have to wait for something bad or really good to happen in order for it to be on the Philadelphia news. They have a Delaware bureau, but there's not a single. Wilmington doesn't have it. Newark doesn't have its own television market. It's kind of sad. Poor little Delaware. It's the first state, but it's last in a lot of other things. So anyway, so I started there in Lexington, which was Market 63. I think at the time it was 65. very lucky. A lot of times, you will start in markets that are triple digits. And market 100, I don't want to tell you what you get paid, but you work hard and you learn a lot. So it's like going to grad school. And then I moved from Lexington. I was there for 2 years, which is a standard contract for most places, 18 months to 24 months. On-air people are made to sign a contract. If you think it's for you, go for that. Keep thinking that it's for them, and then they're protecting their assets. They're saying we're promoting you, we're going to keep you in this role. We want to make you part of our news team, so they keep you there for at least 18 months at a minimum, usually 24 months. So 2 years in Lexington. Then I was excited. I got to move to Nashville, Tennessee, which is another fine town in the South. Which, if anybody knows the South, they really enjoy their sports a lot. College, but Nashville was my first real exposure to professional sports, aside from the University of Kentucky basketball team, which clearly is a professional sport. And certainly it's treated as such. And then I was in Nashville for 2 years, and then in Baltimore for 2 years, and now I've been here. We're coming up on my 7th year anniversary in December. So I moved around quite a bit, which is pretty standard when you want to be on air. You just have to kind of, people make decisions early on. I know people that lived in Lexington and they loved it and they made a life for themselves there and that they stayed there. And there's, certainly that's to each their own. Some people want to keep moving. Some people want to go to a certain part of the country. I'm from Virginia, so I wanted to come back to the East Coast. That's what I grew up with. That's what I knew. And I knew sports-wise, to me, there's 3 really, really good sports towns in America where you could go in the middle of the town and ask Joe Random on the street what X team did last night. And for me, that's, in my opinion, only it's Philadelphia, Boston, and Chicago. Nothing against New York. I see a couple of New York cats up there. Sorry about the Mets game last night. That was an awesome game. I stayed up the whole time. But if you go to New York, because it's so diverse, which makes it amazing, there's a really good chance if I'm walking somewhere in Brooklyn, I can ask what the Nets did, and the guy's going to be like, 1, he might not speak English, but 2, he's not going to know what the Nets did. And that's nothing wrong. I mean, he might be a Marlins fan. He might be a Bears fan. And that's what makes New York such a great town. But if you go in Chicago and you ask what the Bears did on Sunday, they're going to tell you that they lost, and they're going to tell you how many interceptions Jay Cutler threw. And if you go around here and you go to the Home Depot in South Philly and ask what the Eagles did, we'll tell you exactly what Sam Bradford did and why DeMarco Murray's not getting the ball enough. You go to Boston, it'll be the same thing. So for me, in my opinion, those 3 are really just live and die. And so that's when the opportunity arose for me to interview here. I jumped at the chance. I actually interviewed between Game 5s of 2008. In between, if everybody remembers the Game 5 of 2008, how could you forget? I was up in between. I think it was a Monday and a Wednesday were the Game 5s. And so I was up on a Tuesday to interview, it was just really cool. It was cool to be here. It was cool to be, just you could feel the energy, which was great. So, and then I was hired shortly thereafter. Missed the parade, but I was here kind of for it. So that's just a little background of how, as far as how I got here in Philadelphia, and kind of how I came to be a sports anchor. I've always wanted to do it. As soon as I learned that someone would pay you, not a lot, they would pay you to watch sports and stay up late and have a TV at your desk, I was like, that sounds like the greatest job ever. Because that's literally, anybody who's been into any kind of newsroom, certainly come into Comcast Sports Center, and we have a number of writer interns over the years. There's 6 flat screens mounted all over our office, and every single person has a little tiny flat screen at their desk. And it's like being at a sports bar minus the one giant perk, which would be beer, which would make for a very interesting sports cast later. But I mean, everybody's into it. I mean, everybody's watching the game. So last night, I'm sure, we were there. I was there until 11:30 because the Flyers went a little bit late. So when we're watching the World Series, I mean, everybody's oohing and ahhing and screaming, and then you start to look up because you might be typing. What's going on? It's the worst when someone's watching like some game that's random, or like me when I watch Kentucky basketball at my desk and I just freak out. And then people start looking around like, there's game's not even on yet. I'm sorry about that. But it's kind of a fun atmosphere, and that's one of the reasons that I chose to work at what's called a regional sports network, which is Comcast Sportsnet, Sportsnet New York, Yes Network is another example, NESN, which is New England Sports Network. Those are just sports networks for their region. There's a number of them across the country. Comcast, I think they have 11. Houston have 12. Houston, when you talk about carriage costs, that's why they folded. We can talk about that in a little bit when you talk about media rights as far as buying of rights and teams. One thing that makes Comcast successful is that we carry all the games. We don't carry the Eagles games because obviously that's the NFL. We carry the Flyers games, the Sixers games, and the Phillies games, and we carry them all. And so that's why people know who we are. For example, in Houston, they started up a Comcast Sportsnet Houston. Houston's market has grown exponentially in the last decade. They went from 20 to like 12 to now they're, I think, 7. So they've really had a big flux of people coming in. Their teams, they've got plenty. They've got the Rockets, they've got the Astros, they've got, Texans. And then they've got something else, Dynamo. They've got a soccer team too. As far as professional sports, obviously they cover a number of different things. They kind of steer clear of Dallas. I think it's like Baltimore and DC. They just try to pretend that they're not that close. You know, they are. That was so funny when I worked in Baltimore. People were like, do you cover the Capitals? I was like, we don't know DC exists. We're only Orioles and Ravens. We don't pretend about it. We didn't do any Redskins coverage. It was a real complex Baltimore City had about being that close to DC, which is like 45 minutes away, by the way. It would be like saying Wayne, Pennsylvania is not close to Philadelphia, which is absurd. But anyway, so they started a network down there, and they started it all up. They got the carriage rights, they got the rights, they partnered with the Rockets so they could air their games, they partnered with the Astros so they could air their games. I think the Astros actually bought into Comcast Sports, that they were a partner essentially, which kind of always makes it a little dirty as far as the marriage goes. But as far as your coverage, you know, how really, really objective can you be? One of your part owners is one of the teams, but I guess you have to kind of ride that line. But the problem down there was Comcast Cable was newer, and so a lot of people didn't get Comcast. And Cox Cable was the other one, and Time Warner I think was one, and they had a couple different cable companies. And for them to carry, Comcast wanted them to carry Comcast Sportsnet Houston on their regular old sports tier. You just get it. If you get ESPN, you get it. It's not a premium. They didn't want to charge premium because when you charge premium, then your subscriber fee per person for the company is like $6. For you, it's probably, I don't even know what their markup is, probably 100%, it's probably $60. So when if you want to get if you don't have the NFL Red Zone or the NFL Network, I think it's an extra like $12 a month. It probably costs Comcast to pay the NFL Network for those carriage fees like $2 a month. So they were looking for like between $5 and $6, and that was a real problem. And after 2 years, it was only in Comcast Sports. It was only in about 35 to 40% of the Houston designated market area homes, which is a real issue when you're trying to generate dollars when less than half the people can't even see you, which means they couldn't see the Rockets games, they couldn't see the Astros games. Of course, the Astros stunk at the time, which no one really cared. So that was another problem. But so Comcast Houston folded. Actually, Root Sports came in and bought them, and they did away with the rights fees. I think they carry only the Astros now. I don't think they carry the Rockets. They sold that to Fox Sports down there. So that's one of the issues when you look at what ESPN is currently doing, what they're going through, and having to trim. I think they have to trim $250 million, like in the next 2 years. So probably $100 million this year and $150. So they cut 350 people. Some of those people have been there 20 years. Some of those people have been there over 20 years. And a lot of people have wondered, on Twitter and stuff that I see, why aren't on-air people getting cut? Well, some of them did. If you remember Keith Olbermann, he's no longer working there. They weren't going to fight for him and his, I don't even know, multi-million-dollar salary, because I don't think that they saw the payback as far as the return on him. Colin Cowherd's another guy that left. He was a big generator for ESPN Radio. I think that they just didn't think they could meet his demands because he did generate a lot of revenue, but I'm sure he gets paid $11 to $12 million or something crazy. You will never, I shouldn't say this, you will probably never make $11 or $12 million in this business. I hate to break it to you, but I hope you do. I hope you do. Go for it.
All right, quick question. So
Yeah.
you went to University of Kentucky, correct?
I did.
Does each recurring March Madness tournament meet your expectations the first time you went, or will the first time you went always be that?
That's an interesting question, mostly because I went there and covering my team is awesome. It's awesome. It was awesome. I got to cover it. I got to work there for my last year. My senior year, they actually hired me part-time at my television station I interned at. for $7 an hour, and I basically just did whatever they wanted. I would go out and shoot a football game, I'd come back and edit it, and my first time ever on air was New Year's Eve because none of the other guys went to work. It was all guys, obviously. It's a small market, there's only 4 people, including me, that worked there in the sports department, so I anchored New Year's Eve, and then the next day I went and covered the Kentucky-Florida basketball game, which was amazing. So it's always going to be, I'm a huge basketball fan, I'm a huge sports fan. Basketball, college basketball obviously has a special place for me. So covering like a tournament run is always fun. I don't care if I'm covering it for Temple or for Vanderbilt or University of Maryland, it's always fun. But I mean, covering it, when I covered it when I traveled with Kentucky that was the ultimate for me. Because at one point I was still a student. I was literally in the spring of my senior year. I'm up there in Columbus, and they're playing. They beat Florida A&M. They lost to UAB. And these twins on UAB. Anybody know who Mike Anderson is? The coach at where is he now? Missouri, I think. Does anybody remember Nolan Richardson from Arkansas back in the day? Anybody know that guy? No one knows Nolan Richardson in Arkansas on the 1996 national championship team. They ran something called 60 Minutes of Hell, and he would just run him up and down the court, up and down the court, up and down the court. I mean, the stamina was outrageous. They had this really good guy named Corliss Williamson, and he was a big dude. I don't know how he lasted that. So Mike Anderson, that was the last time I covered Kentucky in the tournament. Mike Anderson ended it for me with his UAB team and their 60 Minutes of Hell. They just ran Kentucky up and down the court. They were a number 1 seed. I was really excited about that year. Then they lost to that 8-9 game. It'll always get you. But yeah, I mean, covering it is always fun. I can cover basketball. People always ask me what my favorite sport is to cover. It's a toss-up because football, I feel like I can go to any football game. I can go to a Pee Wee football game to be entertained, a high school football game. I love high school football. College football obviously is awesome, and NFL football is amazing. Basketball I have a little trouble with because there's such a drop off when I get down to like the lower levels, and I'm like, oh really? Scored halftime's 8-6. Great. I'm totally. Is alcohol here? No. I'll just get my Gatorade. So that's harder for me because I really enjoy college basketball and enjoy it at a high level, so it's harder to watch, which makes it great to cover the Sixers. They're fantastic this year. Their coach yesterday, I don't know if anybody watched Comcast Sportsnet last night, and so we get to watch. We have our computers at our desk and our editing. You can kind of edit on our desk, but you can certainly see the resulting product once it's edited, so which is helpful when you're writing a lead-in, so you can actually watch the package or listen to the soundbite. So Brett Brown, who I love, openly comes on, and I'll paraphrase, but his quote was pretty much like this: hey, you start the season tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, we're going to play with a lot of spirit and a lot of heart, and we'll play good defense. We're going to be really ratty offensively. I was like, this guy openly said, we are going to suck offensively. We're going to score maybe 80 points. Because honestly, if Nick Stauskas doesn't play, they're not going to be able to score points. And I mean, I like the team and all, but there's just no one on that team that you're like, well, that guy's going to get you 20. There's someone on that team who's like, that guy's going to get you 8. Another guy's going to get you 12. That equals 20. So there you go. But I mean, yeah, I love March Madness and I love college basketball, but it's always going to be awesome. Covering my team is amazing. There's just no, I mean, when you go there, you think I'm joking when I say it's covered like a professional sport. Chip Kelly has nothing until he goes and tries to be the head coach of University of Kentucky basketball and has those yahoos following him around, doing live shots if he's like on a plane because I think he's maybe going somewhere to interview for a new job. There was a guy that was like ineligible and then was eligible. I'm on a live shot outside the guy's dorm room. The kid is 19 years old, and here I am as a news reporter hounding this poor 19-year-old kid because that's what that fan base demands. Just like the Eagles fan base demands, we ask, why isn't DeMarco Murray getting more touches? Or why isn't Ryan Matthews getting more touches? Because, hello. Or why is Sam Bradford not picking the offense? Same thing is there. It's very, very, very serious. It's very serious. It's actually hilariously serious.
We were talking about earlier on, because Johnson's question is really interesting. Do the criticisms, do reporters have to be cheerleaders for the hometown team? And the difference between pro and college. So in Lexington, are they cheerleaders?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's hard because, I mean, honestly, you want the teams to win. It's so much easier to cover a winner. It's more fun to cover a winner. It's more interesting sometimes to cover a loser for different reasons, because you can have a coach search, which is always interesting. You have the bylines behind that. But it is such a fine line because when you're there, you feel like you want the team to do well. And that's just human nature. You just can't sit in a room with somebody and wish them to lose. I don't care if I sat in the room with Tony Romo, who I do not like the Cowboys at all, but I'm not going to sit there and if I meet the man and be like, oh, that guy goes out and breaks his shoulder, which I did not say. I promise I did not break my shoulder. But it's an interesting thing because in colleges, you see the reporters wear the colors of the school when they're out. And they've got something, they call it, Kentucky's, for example, Big Blue Nation. And so if you're on that March Madness trail, and if you're not wearing blue when you're in your live shots, you will literally get emails from viewers. I once wore a kind of like a cream or beige colored blazer, and I had this hot pink shirt on underneath. And it was the Kentucky, I'll say it how you guys say it, Louisville game. Because when I say it how I say it, local people don't know what I'm talking about. The Kentucky-Louisville game, which is an absolute just UNC Duke type of rivalry, but more so because those are the only two schools in town. It's only two schools, separated by 45 minutes, and those are the only two schools in the entire state. And so it was an amazing game. This guy gets fouled, shooting a three-pointer, classic lean in, makes all three, wins the game. So I come on, and I'm doing the report, whatever, and I get, and this is, email obviously was around, I think I got like 4 emails. We got probably 6 calls to the newsroom asking why I was wearing red and white covering the Louisville, Kentucky game. And I was like, first of all, I just graduated there from like 6 months ago. There's no part of me that likes Louisville at all. Hates Louisville. My mom went to Kentucky. There's no way. I couldn't have gone there. She would have disowned me. But I was like, first of all, guy, it's pink. So adjust your color on your TV set. You need to maybe get a new TV set because it probably has bunny ears on top because you're calling from Nowhereville. But I was like, that's to me, like that was, and I knew about the rivalry certainly, but like that to me is a real bona fide example of what it's like to cover a college team in a college town. You better pretend, anyway, that you are for that team, that you are, they're your team. Even if you're not, even if you went to Louisville, it doesn't matter. I mean, if I'm a giant Cowboys fan, I will keep that under wraps. I am not. I'll write that out there, don't have to tweet that out. But you know what I mean, like, I do like the Pittsburgh Steelers when I worked in Baltimore, but I mean, like, that's at the pro level, no one cared. I didn't have to wear purple when I was reporting on the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't care if I wore purple or not. But at the college level, you have to at least kind of put on the show that you support the team. And honestly, you will, because if you're at a college town, that's your bread and butter. And that's where you're going to get all your stories from. That's where you do all your reporting. So you should try to go ahead and at least be friendly-ish with the team. But that's a good question because it is such a different animal when you cover colleges and when you cover pros. You never say we at any level. Just don't say we. I don't care if you, I mean, I went there and I still didn't say we. It's just, that's definitely muddying the waters as far as, well, we need to do this. You do not suit up. You do not play in that game. I don't care if you did play in that game. Still don't say we. So I know there's some former athletes. We have guys that do that on our set. Brian Westbrook will say it. God knows Brian Westbrook's in the Eagles Hall of Fame. I'm not going to tell him he can't say we, but every time he says it, I'm like, don't say we. You're not a we anymore. Your we isn't us. You're one of us now. So I think that's like an important thing once you kind of try to separate yourself with that. You can do somewhat more of a better job reporting. And the teams know. You're not going to hurt people's feelings. I think that's another thing when you're out there in the field and you ask maybe a question that you know is going to get a negative response, or you can see the coach or the player kind of like shut down a little bit with their body language. You have to realize it's not personal. They don't dislike you. They dislike the question or maybe the situation you're asking about. I'm sure Chip Kelly hates being asked if he's going to go to University of Texas or Southern Cal all the time. But you got to ask the question, because if he goes and no one ever asked him, then you're going to be really pissed off at yourself. I'm not going to do what I said, but at least you had it on the record. No, I'm not interested. No one's contacting me from the University of Texas type of thing. So I think that's another thing that you just keep in mind, that while you can support them, they're not your friends. You do not work for the team, and they're not going to look out for you. So you don't really need to look out for them, which is an interesting media relations thing too, because there's always a give and take. You know, if you do this for me, I can do that for you. And you'll have teams that will try to do that. They'll try to sit on stories or maybe like steer you in a certain direction. And if you want them to do that, you know, and you're okay with that, And if your bosses are okay with that, then you should get something in return. You need to get an exclusive, you need to get a sit-down type of thing. Because there are guys that break stories all the time, and they sit on them as a courtesy to the team because they're going to be promised something in return. I think that's a pretty standard, especially when it comes to beat writers. There's a reason those guys get all that stuff. There's a reason that Adam Schefter knows everything before it happens, that Jim Salisbury literally knew about Andy McPhail 6 months before anybody knew Andy McPhail's name in Philadelphia, and he knew that he was coming here. So that was a classic moment in that press conference. Andy McPhail is introduced, and Jim Salisbury, it's normal in press conferences, especially when they don't know you, to say, Andy McPhail from Comcast Sports Center, and you go into your question. As soon as Jim Salisbury raised his hand and said that, Andy McPhail was like, you're the guy. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing because you can kind of work your source, but at the end of the day, you just remember that they're not your friend, because they're not going to look out for you when it comes time to, if something, really happens or shades the fans, so to speak. So, but
When you first arrived in Philadelphia, all of the major sports teams, they were on the rise or either very
you're
well.
saying it's my fault?
No,
It is, isn't it?
I'm just saying now it feels like the Phillies are not too great. The Sixers are tanking, and it's not the same vibe. How does your job description change as that goes?
Well, I mean, the description will honestly never really change. I mean, our description at the basic level is to go on air and report about sports or tell you about sports. But it's a lot different. I mean, it was last year for the first time, I think in 20 years they said, or 25 years, that none of the 4 teams made the playoffs, which is very unusual around here, obviously. So it changes the rhetoric a bit in the fact that you're really having to look for a reason to tell the viewers why to watch. I mean, if I came on and honestly said what I want to say before some of the Sixers games, hey, coming up at Sixers pregame live, they're getting ready to take on the Rockets. They're going to lose by 20. Please tune in. Like, that's honestly that's a real tease. But no one's going to watch that show. Please tune in for the Phillies. You can see guys like Cody Ashe and whoever they're trotting out starting pitching lines. So, I mean, like, it's harder to find ways to make the news more watchable. I don't want to say that it makes it, worse, because it makes it, it's finally to do your job. It's easy to be like, hey, Phillies are playing. Honestly, when they were in 2008, 2009, 2010, I could have just come on and said, hey, Phillies, and then just gone like this, and then everybody would have watched, because everybody was watching the Phillies. But now you have to kind of really, I don't want to say you have to make it positive, because you don't want to lie, but you really have to find ways to really keep the viewers interested. And that's why on Sixers, we do talk a lot about the future, and we go down later in the season and look at some of the top college guys, because if you're interested in the Sixers, that's who you should be interested in, is who's coming out. So that's why we would talk about guys like Jaleel Okafor and Emmanuel Mudiay last year, and to see where they could go. And so that's why for the Phillies, we did talk a lot about the young guys. So Michael Franco got a lot of pub, and Cody Ashe, Darren Ruff, guys that maybe if you gave them a 162 games, what could they do? Because that's the only reason to watch, except for maybe it's just on in the background. Because you're not watching for good baseball, you're not watching for good basketball. For the Flyers last year, you weren't watching for good hockey, and they were terrible. They couldn't get off to good starts, they lost pretty much every game, went to a shootout. They were terrible in the power play. They had all kinds of problems, but they got a good draft pick, so that's where our focus was towards the end of the year. So it changes what you say, but it doesn't change like how you approach your day. You still go in, and like I go in at 3:30, and we have a meeting, and then we talk about what's going on at the 6 o'clock show. If I'm doing the 6 o'clock show or the 5 o'clock show, I usually go to 2 for that, and then the 10 o'clock show we have a 7 o'clock meeting. So you just kind of go through. It's still the same day-to-day stuff as far as job description, but your rhetoric changes quite a bit, because you have to find something to really tease people to get them to watch.
Okay, so you believe coverage on Blue Mobile will this year, just because?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's such a weird, and that was something I'm not used to. I mean, I worked in Nashville, which is a pro team, 2 pro teams. They have the Predators and the Titans, and I worked in Baltimore, which has 2 pro teams, in the Ravens and the Orioles. But in both of those towns, college basketball and college sports was still really big. Here it just isn't. It doesn't move the needle, so to speak, when you look at the ratings. Sports as a whole, if you go into a newsroom, now I don't work in a newsroom, I work in a sports station. So there isn't, if you go in a newsroom, they've got scanners at their front desk. They're listening to all the police activities, so they can send their crews out. The guy at the desk has to know all the police codes and what all that, that's terrible. murder, fire, shootings, all kinds of stuff, send people out. If you go into a newsroom, sports is like, that's, if you watch a sportscast or a newscast, sports is all at the bottom. That's essentially how it's ranked. So here, it was great to work at only sports station, but it was very strange to me to have college basketball not be a really big pull. Last year was a big pull because Villanova was really good. Obviously, they went 29-0 at some point, and they finished with 29-4. They won the Big East tournament for the first time in Jay Wright's history, and they were a #1 seed. And we still, like, we did coverage, but we're not sending, like, we go to Eagles every single day. We usually have 2 reporters at Eagles every single day. We go to Phillies every single day, Flyers, any day they're practicing. Villanova we go to once or twice a week, which is actually a lot. And it sounds, when you compare it to the other professional sports, it sounds like it's not a lot, but for this town and for this market, that's a lot of coverage. There's several people that are big college basketball fans. There's a guy that went to Villanova there. He's a producer. He pushes for this guy that went to UNC. He pushes for more college basketball. Me, Marshall Paris, is another Southern guy, another Southern big SEC school. So we're always the ones kind of feel like carrying the banner for the college basketball coverage. It's just, it's going to be a little bit more because it'll be in our building. So, I mean, obviously, but we cover it no matter what, but just the level of coverage is just never going to reach the Eagles. And just, this market doesn't demand it. If you look at, if anybody ever looks at, does anybody read Richard Deitch? Is it Deitch or Deitch?
I think it's Beach.
That's how I say it. He writes for USA Today, and I think he writes also for Sports Illustrated. He covers the media for those 2 publications. And he always has, he's a great follower on Twitter. He's snarky, and so he goes at people. He hates Skip Bayless, which is really funny to follow for that. But he always tweets interesting nuggets about coverage and ratings. And so you hear about the top shows. I mean, I can't even, I'm always working, so I don't know like really what the top show is. Like, what's a top like sitcom drama on television, like on NBC, ABC, CBS? CSI, are those so popular?
Yeah, I think I even asked the class the same question. I think CSI, Big Bang Theory.
Oh, Big Bang Theory, I hear about that one a lot. So that probably garners like a 12 rating, because it's really highly rated, or a 14. On a really good night, like a college football game or an NFL game, like a college football game on Saturdays, which is their day, they might garner like a 3, 8, or a 4, which is that's a good number for a college football game. An NFL game, you'll hear like the most watched. It's never going to get to the level of like Cheers or Friends or that stuff. It won't. There's just not that many people interested, even though it's foreign to all of us that like sports. Why you wouldn't watch the Super Bowl? People don't. I've always been amazed by that. They're at the party and they don't even care about anything, even the commercials. But so it's just a little bit skewed on the fact of like, so when you think about college, like in our minds, college basketball, especially this year, and Philadelphia being one of the host sites, should be huge. It just won't be. That's just the nature of the beast. And that's true for a lot of towns. I mean, in University of Kentucky, they'll garner like a 12 or a 10 rating on their basketball games, but they're the exception, not the rule. That's just sports.
I have a question about what you're doing in your job. Do you social endeavors in the way of your job, or do you use your job to sort of push that away?
What do you mean social endeavors?
Well, anything. It could be like a family member passing.
Oh, you
or
mean like
can
a
get
life?
into a car
You don't
accident.
have didn't you tell them that about lives? You work nights and weekends and holidays. There's no life. Yes, I mean, that's actually a very interesting and very multi-answer question, because you could honestly make this your entire life, and there's many people who have. And I made it was my life for a long time. I mean, you don't have relationships for any period of time if you're moving every 2 years, unless the person really wants to move every 2 years with you, which would be great. But you have to make a concerted effort. And as a woman in this industry, and as a woman in any kind of industry, really, that's a very hard balance. It's in this industry, not because it's a woman going into a locker room. I think that those days hopefully are pretty much behind us. There's still that story in Indianapolis where the old man didn't let the 2 women in, which is, he was like, well, you can't go in there, they're showering. That's what that's what we want to go in and see. That's exactly what we're looking to do there, old man. But it's an interesting thing. It doesn't get in the way as much as you can let it get in the way. So it's always a built-in excuse. I mean, when you work in this business, you work nights, you work weekends, and you work holidays. TV's always on. It's on Christmas, it's on New Year's Eve, it's on Thanksgiving. You work all those days. And especially if you live in San Antonio, you don't work from home. And it's actually a really good opportunity. That's how I got my first one. I think I told you guys. My first couple of days actually anchoring when the red light went on, doing a sportscast and being terrified out of my mind, literally scared shitless, just terrified, was New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and then the following year, I think I did like another like random holiday, maybe it was the day after. But you get that opportunity because people don't want to work holidays. You want to be with your family. But when you're young, you won't. I mean, I told my parents that I'm not going to be coming home for Christmas, and they realized that. Also, don't call me before 9 a.m. because I'm not going to sleep anytime before 2. I don't get off work until 11:30, and I'm not going to sleep as soon as I walk in the door. So you don't go to sleep until like 1:30. So when your mom calls you at 8, you don't really want to talk to her. So they kind of, people in your life start to realize it. So you can use it as an excuse, like I can't make this event because I have to work, or you can make it work for you. I think that so many times, and I say that from personal experience, sometimes it's like, not like if you see family member die, like no, you can absolutely go to the funeral. People are very understanding about that. There's other people that can cover for you. But if there's something that you're kind of leaning towards, like not going to, like a family reunion that you really think is going to be a pain in the butt, and you don't really want to go, I have to work, too bad, my job, it's so going to end me. So I think that life can be what you make it. Like I said earlier, there's some people that stayed in Lexington, Kentucky because they found a good life-work balance. It's a good-sized market. You cover the Bengals and the Reds. That's only 45 minutes away Cincinnati is, so you get a little bit national, or as far as professional sports exposure. You cover University of Kentucky like it's your life, and you live in a nice town, and you can have a life because you can be the big guy in the medium-sized pond. So I don't want to call it a small town because literally this market like 198 is definitely a small pond. So it's hard to have a life, but you make it. You make it happen, just like you would at any job. I mean, I know people that are doctors and lawyers and advertising people, and they all have, you all work the non-traditional schedule as far as a work day is really becoming more of the norm rather than the 9 to 5. I go to a bank, I clock in, clock out Monday through Friday. I just don't know that many people that do that anymore. A lot more people are working, past 5 o'clock, past 6 o'clock. They might work Friday night or a Saturday type of thing. So you just kind of go with it. I mean, it's the only, you really have to, that's what I always tell people, the pay is so bad at the opening levels, it's laughable, honestly. Does anybody want to guess, and I should check these numbers, but 2 years ago, they're probably not too far off. If you graduated from here and you've got your journalism degree and you just got hired for your first job and you're in market 120, which is not a bad starting spot, considering it goes over 220. Does anybody want to guess what the average starting salary is of a journalist, a broadcast journalist? Good God, that would be awesome. Oh, that would be great. You would actually be able to use cable.
20,000?
A little bit lower. I don't know, teachers are bad. No, we're not poor. You can function. It's around 18.5. It might be closer to 20 now. It might be 19. That's gross, not net. So just remember that when you get that and you're like, ooh, it's FICA. Screw you, FICA. Screw you, Medicaid. This stuff is not going to be around when I need it. But you kind of, it is what it is. It's basically making like $10 an hour. You don't have cable. I mean, if you do, that's awesome. But I didn't have cable for like 2 years. It was too expensive. Now it's free, which is good, because it's still too expensive. But it's just, when you're at that level, as far as your life, you just kind of make it work. I mean, everybody else is in the same boat. When you're at that first level, people always ask me, like, oh, should I go to graduate school? I'm like, well, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to be on air, to be graduate school doesn't offer that as much as your first on-air job would, because you're going to be making no money. You're going to be getting amazing, amazing exposure and experience. And everybody that works at that little station with you is going to be in the same boat. They're all going to be making I made $24,000. You thought I was rolling in it. Gross, not net. Gross. Very important. I never really realized the difference between gross and net until you get your tiny little paycheck. Like, I can't live on this. But cost of living is usually small in those towns. But everybody, that's just how you make your life, is when you're with the people that are doing what you do. It's a lot of fun. I mean, it sounds weird, but when I say I like high school football, there's nothing better in a small town, especially in sports, if you're interested in sports, to go to a small town in the Midwest. Pittsburgh's huge, but Midwest or South, and they love their high school football. You walk onto that little campus, the little track that they've got to shoot the football game, you might, and you've got your letters on their jacket, because that's free advertising. Believe me, your television station will make you wear that jacket. You're the biggest rock star in the town. The town's 10,000 people, and you might as well just be Elvis walking through the door, honestly. It's awesome, and it's a lot of fun to see sports at that level, and it's fun to follow the stories. And there's a lot of times you see this story, especially if the kids are really good, you can follow them all the way through. I mean, there was a kid that, Jake Tammy, I covered in high school, I covered him in college, because he went to Kentucky, and then now he's with the Falcons. He was with the Colts for a long time. Peyton Manning loved him. But I mean, like, that's cool. I see Jake Tammy, I'm like, holy cow, that guy at Danville High School back in 2003, which is insane. So the life you make, maybe not the life you see other people having, but it'll get there eventually. You make it happen. Probably the best way to say it. For women, it's harder. It's harder, period.
So being that you work on outside the way, is that like a non-compete clause or not clause that have you want to do with the computer?
Contracts.
Go to the national broadcast.
Yeah, it's interesting. Contracts are another thing that you really can't fully prepare for. I remember my mom was so excited. She's like, oh, you got a contract, means you'll have a job. I'm like, I read this, and that's not what it says at all. It basically says that you can't do this, this, and this, and this, and we own you for 2 years. Which is great, but they can basically fire you whenever they want. I'm sure they'll find a reason. But luckily, that's never happened. But contracts are an interesting thing. Everybody's going to sign them on air, and there's always, almost always, a non-compete clause. If I wanted to stay in Philadelphia, I would have to sit out, I think according to my contract, a year before I went to anywhere else. You see that a lot. Even if they let you go. So everybody seen the ads for Kathy Orr on, she's going to be on Fox? So Kathy Orr used to be on CBS for a long time. I think she was on NBC before that. She's a weather person. And CBS cut a bunch of people. Cut Beasley, who was getting ready to retire. They cut their news guy, Chris something or other, and they cut Kathy Orr. And so Kathy Orr got hired by the Fox station in Philadelphia, and she had to wait, though, for a year. You could fight it because there is a, you could cite, certainly right to work type of things, but it'll probably take you 6 months to fight it and a lot of money, and so people just usually wait it out. TV people, they know that on the hiring side as well. So if I wanted to leave, any kind of contract's always going to have, if you're smart about it, hopefully, not in your first job because you're just so excited, you just sign on the line, just sign it. Hopefully, it'll all work out. It's really how you kind of feel, but there's going to be usually out clauses. I remember my first contract, because I had talked to a couple people, I had an out for a top 25 market, which Nashville actually was number 29, but it didn't matter because I was already at the end of my contract anyway. But when I went to Nashville, if there was an opportunity, I had an out in my contract at any point. With 60 days notice, I could leave for a top 10 or in Nashville. In Baltimore, actually, I left before the end of my contract because this was a top 10 market. Actually, this is considered somewhat semi-national, which didn't matter. It was in there both ways. And I had an agent at that point, which is something you will get, you might be interested in later down the road. You can't afford an agent with your first job. You just can't. You pay him 8 to 10% of your total contract. So if you sign a 3-year contract, say worth $50,000, he gets 8% or 10% of the $150,000. He gets it of the gross, not of the net. So just keep that in mind. But they're very useful in certain instances. They're useful with contracts, they're useful for finding jobs. A lot of the bigger jobs, they only talk to agents. It's harder to, unless you know somebody at ESPN that can put your tape in front of the right person, an agent's probably going to get you that interview. Is everybody, have you guys talked about reels, resume reels?
Maybe some of the TV.
Yeah, so some of the TV people in here, you might know what a resume reel is, or if you're a print person, you know your clips. Your resume, written on the paper, is not as useful as it is for somebody that's going to be going into a finance type of industry. It's just not the same thing. Our top things are your work, right? And that's really what you're paying a journalist for. So if you're a print journalist, whether you're doing PR or advertising or writing, it's going to be your newspaper clips and your advertising clips and your PR news releases. And if you're an on-air person, it's going to be your on-air stuff. And so you literally give them, we used to mail VHS tape back in the day, which was not that long ago. And now you just send them, obviously, just an online clip, usually hosted by a private server, unless you want everybody out there judging your work on YouTube. It'd be weird, but so that's kind of how you can kind of get that out there. But as far as contracts go, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've got outs, but I have a family now. This goes back to Jonathan. Is that your name? Jonathan's question? it makes it harder. It makes it harder to move when you have a family. My husband's from here, he's from Chester County, so he's interested in staying here, obviously. We have a little son now, just turned 1. So it's definitely, I don't look at it as the same as I used to. But I do have them out there just in case. I mean, you never know when an opportunity is going to arise. And there's a lot of jobs that don't require moving per se. They might just require travel. There's people that, like Sal Palantonio lives over in South Jersey. As much as you see him, you think he might be living in Bristol, but he does not live in Connecticut, which is where ESPN is based in Bristol, Connecticut, which is in the middle of nowhere. It's 2.5 hours from New York, straight west. But there's a lot of people that work for ESPN that don't work there. That don't live there. So contracts are a different thing. You have to sign them. They're a necessary evil, as I like to put it. But you always want to make sure that you're protected as much as it lets you. And so that's why you have the outs for national, or mine would only be national, but I couldn't go anywhere in Philadelphia tomorrow. I would have to wait out my non-compete. I think it's a year. That's pretty much standard to be a year. It is what it is. Villanova first.
Okay. You mentioned being a woman in your line of work. How has it affected your career and experience in getting jobs?
It's interesting. It's definitely changed. And it's not like I came into this, I mean, you've got the real pioneers of this, like a Robin Roberts and Leslie Visser types that have been in this industry 30 plus years. And so they were really ones at the forefront of getting in there and fighting the good fight, so to speak, fighting their way into the locker room. But it doesn't mean it's still easy. People they just assume that we don't know anything about sports because we didn't play football. Newsflash. 90% of the people covering the team didn't play football or basketball or anything else. But with a woman, the expectation is already lower. You're never going to meet like whatever it is. If I go on television, and I don't care if the guy is a 75-year-old man who's clearly never played sports in his entire life, people automatically assume he knows more about football than me. No matter what. It doesn't matter. So with women, it's a little bit harder to, and it's unfair, but that's just the nature of the beast, and you realize it. It's not as fair because people just assume you don't know what you're talking about. So as soon as you make a mistake, you just reaffirm their suspicion or their preconceived notions. So if the guy makes a mistake, if a guy goes on and mispronounces a name, oh, he just messed up. But if I went on and mispronounced a name, well, she doesn't know anything about sports. And that doesn't offend me in the least bit. Some people say stuff like that to me, usually on Twitter or Facebook or things like that, because the anonymity of the internet is just amazing. And I usually call them out on it because, one, I do know my stuff, and two, they would never say that to my face, and they would never say that to a man. But I can't bitch and whine about it because I got into this industry knowing that. My first job, it was all men in the South, and they did not enjoy a woman in their sports. I was the first woman they'd ever hired in sports. They did not enjoy that. I'll never forget one of the things that stands out. Still, it's over 10 years now, 11 years. It was, something was going on where our main sports guy had to be back for the 5 o'clock. We did a 5 o'clock and a 6 o'clock. And our other sports guy was going to University of Kentucky for something. Somebody was signing something, I can't remember what, but there was a high school kid, a big high school kid, who was getting ready to sign his pro contract, so we wanted to cover that. And I'm in the sports office, and so there's really only two sports guys, the sports shooter, the main sports guy, sports shooter, photographer, that's what we call our camera guys, the shooters, and me. I'm sitting there at my computer, just typing away, kind of doing this stuff. And I hear them talking. Our sports office is like from here to here. So it's not like I eavesdropping, they're literally right next to me. And they were like, oh, I don't know how we're going to do this. We need to cover, so-and-so signing. It was this guy, Austin, what was his last name? He played for the Reds. Anyway, it was a baseball guy. Austin Kearns? Anyway. So anyway, he was signing, went to Lafayette High School, which is in Lexington. He was signing, they didn't have a camera, so they're like, I guess we'll go down to the news department and ask them if we can send somebody, if they can send somebody news-wise, which to a sports person is just a disaster. Because sports people, we know our stuff, we know what we want. News people, just like if I went to cover like a fire, I would have no idea what to ask. Hey, how did it start? Was it hot? I don't know. How long has it been going? Would you give that fire, like a 10 or a 9? I would have no idea. So when you send news people to do sports, that's why you see them, sports people cringe. So they'll be like, well, the Eagles are going to play the Panthers tonight. It should be a great football game. My God. So they were talking about going down to news. I wheel around. I'm like, guys, I'm here. I'm here until 10 o'clock at night or whenever you need me. No, this is pretty important. We can't send you to do it. Yeah, I actually work here though. Like I'm not just like some intern. And so I kind of, I was new, probably only 6 months in, but I interned at that station, and then they hired me part-time. The general manager had hired me, and then so clearly these guys didn't have anything to do with my hire. And so they kind of keep talking. I guess we will. And I just stood up and was like, you know what? I've got my gear already loaded up. I'm just going to go get it. I just emailed Austin's agent. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And I just left because I was just like, screw them. Like, screw this entire thing. Of course, I went home later and had my girl moment where I cried, but I did not cry at the office because I was like, screw you guys. But I just went and did it. And all I could think about was like, please don't let the video be blue or out of focus and let me remember the mic. Like, honestly, because it would have been just classic if I had gone back. If you don't, blue video, if anybody that's ever, I don't know if you guys are using gear yet or not, you have to white balance any camera. You have to literally point at something white and put this white balance on. You get a yes or whatever, it says okay. But if you don't, your video will, everybody will look like a smurf. It's god awful and I've done it. There's ways to fix it in editing, but you just don't want to walk back in, especially after that little scene that I was like, I didn't do it, so I came back or whatever. And then, of course, they never said anything. They never said thanks. They never said good job, which I didn't expect. But honestly, that helped me. Like, that stuff like that helps you. Any kind of adversity that anybody faces always is going to help you. I'm a firm believer in that, in anything. Whether you're the only person in your family to ever go to college, I think that's going to help you at college. You're the only person, to do this crazy journalism thing. That's going to help you because people are going to be constantly expecting you to fail. And so I think as a woman, you deal with that a lot more at the ready. And that was something that I wasn't used to. I was always, told that you can do whatever you want. My mom and dad were really great about that. If you want to do that, you can do it. So I think that as a woman, it's hard in certain instances, but in others, honestly, I haven't had, I was in Nashville, I had some jackasses in the locker room who thought it was really funny to like drop their towel and stuff. And I can give as good as I can get, so I think people learn that pretty quickly. I'm pretty sarcastic and I can get pretty snarky, and so when like the big giant white lineman is over there dropping the towel, I'm like, is that what you're working with today? Do you want me to put my camera there? My magnifying glass? So like, they kind of stopped doing that stuff, but it's just not as prevalent as it used to be. I mean, I know you hear these horror stories back from like 20 years ago, and it was that way a little bit maybe 10 years ago, but I just don't experience it as much anymore. I mean, I cover all the major sports teams here, and I have yet to have any kind of negative thing. I mean, it's awkward for the guys to be, because we're fully clothed and you're in a locker room. It's just awkward. But you're not in there to check them out. And they realize that. They know it's part of their job, and they signed up, that's why they get paid millions of dollars, whatever else. But as a woman, I think the hardest part isn't the life and times of the sports reporter. I think it's the life part of figuring out your life and making the decision. I made the decision when I was in Baltimore that I was only going to make one more move. And that's why I looked I was very discerning when I looked for my next move. And that's why I wanted to come to a sports-only station, because I was tired of working in news and having like, it snowed out, your sportscast is cut. By cut, I mean it's done. You went from 5 minutes to 2 minutes to no minutes, which is very disheartening. What purpose do I serve here? But now we don't ever get cut. If it snows, no one cares. We still go on to tell you about it. Obviously, the local television station, like NBC, ABC, CBS, they're affiliated, they're going to have their sports. But I wanted to have a life that I thought was maybe more normal. Now I do still work. Usually like today I do the 10 o'clock show and the midnight show. So I will get home until like 12:45 at night, which is great. The little guy thankfully sleeps until like 7 o'clock or so, so I'll get a couple hours in. But it's a life that you try to kind of notch out, so to speak. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard because when are you going to meet somebody? That's what people always ask me. You're always moving around, and I talk like my mother. Like, when are you going to meet some nice guy? I don't know. You're a career woman. I'll never forget that. I was like, I don't even know what that means. My grandmother said that to me. I think my grandma once, it was like 6 years ago, and I had just taken this job. She was like, it's okay if you never get married. It was just like completely out of the blue, like we were playing cards or something. I was like, oh, thank you. I don't think I asked if it was okay or not. But I think that's the assumption, is that you can have a life. You can, it just is a little bit harder. But it's hard for guys too. I mean, this industry is just, when you work in sports, think about when you're watching sports. They're at night and on the weekends. I mean, that's when you're working. So it's just harder, but you find ways. It becomes easier. it seems daunting at first, honestly, when you're out there, but it's easy.
A lighter kind of question. What was the best thing you've ever covered? What was like your favorite memory?
There's so many good. There's really so many good ones. And honestly, covering any kind of March Madness is fun. Of course, it ended in heartbreak. But one of the most fun things I did, the most interesting, because I'd never really been exposed that much to baseball. When I moved to Baltimore, it was the same year that Cal Ripken was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And following him, he's huge there. He's huge, period. I don't know if everyone's ever seen him. This guy's like 6'3", 6'4". He's built like a tight end. He's huge. I don't know why I thought he was going to be like Joe Average, but he was a big guy. We followed him all around. We went up to Cooperstown. He went in with Tony Gwynn, and they really interesting and really neat thing, because they did a lot of their PR stuff together. They went in together, and they were the first guys in a long time. They'll probably be the first guys until Jeter goes in to only play their entire career with one team. It just doesn't happen anymore. Tony Gwynn was only a Padre. Obviously, Cal Ripken was only an Oriole. But meeting those guys, and we got a lot of access because I don't know why exactly. We kind of got friendly with this guy John Maroon, who used to be Orioles PR, and then he opened his own PR firm. And he basically, one of his biggest clients is Cal Ripken. So we flew out to San Diego when Ripken was out there with Tony, and just seeing them and seeing those guys and seeing how great they were really with each other and with the fans. Those are two really of the classiest guys to ever play the game. I mean, Tony Gwynn, he's just phenomenal. He's just supremely missed as far as a real ambassador of the game. And then to go up there for Cooperstown, you're there and just you walk in, it's hallowed halls. I never really walked into a building and kind of felt like an energy of the building, but when you walk even on the campus of Cooperstown and just the whole area, it was amazing. That to me is, as a whole, it wasn't really one day, but it was like a whole culmination of events and really getting the behind the scenes and sitting down and getting to know these guys and seeing them and really kind of interacting with them at a different level was really cool. I mean, still being a journalist, it wasn't like we were going out and having drinks and stuff together, but it was really cool to be there for it. And it was a completely positive story, so it really wasn't, I didn't have to be Mike Wallace or anything. I didn't ask him on steroids.